That'll pop out on YouTube here any second. There we go. That'll pop out on. All right, let me drop that link in the chat. There's the YouTube stream. Do I have Devin or Tim on board? No, not yet anyway. Okay, let me just go add that real quick to the excuse me, to the schedule. What the heck is today? The 23rd? Yeah. Wow, we're almost out of Feb. Time flies when you toast off your entire February with surgical dumbness. Actually, time does not fly, turns out. Time drags badly, which is part of the reason that I'm here with you today when I probably shouldn't be. I really, like, truly maybe shouldn't be, you know, but it's like everything gets kind of, you know, I don't know, purposeless or blendo, you know what I mean? Everything just kind of blends together, and I miss you guys, and I miss our discussions, and so I'm basically decided I was going to do all six of my section lectures this week. And I think last week I did 2, and I decided I was going to just get all 6. And this is actually 3 out of 3 for the first half of the week. So I'm a little beat. My leg is crazy sore. But I'm here, happy to be here. All right. Everybody rocking and rolling? Are we good? So let me hit you with, man, everything's still kind of flexo, but here is, I don't think it was until like just the other day, yesterday, day before, that I was even like on my laptop. That's how slow this recovery has been. But just before class, I jumped on and tried to just bring this up to date just a little bit. So what I did was, I told you guys before to just be doing at least a weekly smallish post, you know? And so I went ahead and just added smallish post kind of number 4, where it would have been, which is like last Sunday, and then 5, which is this coming Sunday, and the same with the blog comments. And I, published the assignments, linked to it, so it should be functional, except for that color is off. And then, like I told you, and then I ungrade all of this stuff, but I've still got to do a little bit of work. It turns out that sitting at my desk, sitting upright, is really difficult with the spinal surgery. But I preferred it over trying to, get in my recliner, get comfy, put a pillow behind my head, and then lecture from that position. So that was like personal choice, I guess. So I've just kind of limited myself to actual get on the laptop time, but I'm getting a little bit more able to do that. So anyway, so like as far as deadlines, don't worry about it. Just do them. Just do the submissions. We'll get to it. And like I said before, once you've done it, you've gotten graded. if you want to resubmit, resubmit, and then just do the actual resubmission, and it triggers the mechanism, so we see it as a new assignment. All right, there's Devin. Hey, man. All right. So, how y'all doing? Better than me? I hope.
I'm doing
We'll
good.
we'll see if I make it to 5:15. I don't. I'm really, really sore. Really sore. Having done lecture earlier today and sat in this chair for an hour and a half. I'm not supposed to go more than like 30 or 40 minutes per hour. So going the full length of a class is a little hard. Unless I pause, take a little break, walk down the hall and back or something. But here's what I wanted to do, and I'm gonna just do this in one shot. What I want to do today is I want to talk about history of computing, and I got some slides, just sort of like I don't know, just it's a little bit of interesting sort of human history. Um, Hang on a second. Okay. No, it's an interesting bit of history, and as it were, but no, to kind of just get a little retrospective and go all the way back, which kind of brings it forward. We're kind of just glomming this sort of together as a conclusion. I gave you a bunch of reading, and then y'all went off and watched Cringely. You should have by now, and I'll figure something out there to mark attendance. Basically, you get attendance points for having watched Cringely. And then there's another one when I finally finish it, attendance points for watching Social Dilemma and or, checking out my comments, but I still just got to finish that file. Okay, so those are going to be attendance days, and I'll figure those out still. Like I said, I'm just barely, you know, cranking up here. Um, Jordan, what media should our smallish post be based on? No, so definitely not the Cuckoo's Egg, because the Cuckoo's Egg is a book inspired post. There's a whole assignment called Book Inspired Post. That's Cuckoo's Egg. Um, what I would like you to do for the smallish posts like 4 and 5 that I just posted, they're just squarely in this history of computing. I'd like it to be about the history of computing. Just, and again, you're not responding to Cringely or responding to these things. Uh, you're inspired by that whole space, making some statement, that you want to make about the field, about something, right? So, review the assignment again. But that makes sense. So, smallest post 4 and 5 that I just posted. Um, And yeah, Gabe, you can do Gabe asked, can we do the book post sooner? Oh yeah, absolutely. You can do that today. If you're done reading the Cuckoo's Egg, man, go get it up there, right? No harm done. Then later on when then you can just submit, and I don't know if I've got it live yet, so I apologize, but you can still get the blog post up, and then when it's time to make it go live, you just put it in the link, you know. Um, And yeah, I didn't actually say this explicitly, but Cuckoo's Egg, what's the date on it? It's only like a week away, It's been coming, but Cuckoo's Egg is like a week away. And we can still adjust that. I mean, again, everything's been a little bit whacked because of my unexpected, difficult recovery from this surgery. So, yeah, March 2nd. Yeah, that's like a week and a half or something. So, or maybe not even that, maybe a week. So, um, yeah. Okay. Let me see. I want to hit this thing. I want to talk about history of computing, then I want to talk about Cringely, and that's really just all I want to do today. And then we'll be I think that's probably going to be good enough for the history of computing. and then maybe we can come on back and we'll figure out what the next topics are. There are a few coming up, and I just got to get. There was actually a point where I had to get like off of certain narcotics, get off of certain drugs just to be able to have the cognitive wherewithal to even just get back, around everything. So again, my apologies for all that. Feel a little bit. Can you see the low energy? I'm a little bit faded, man. I got like 3 hours last night of sleep, just because of stupid nerve pain. Um, so I'm trying to figure that out a little bit more. That's been really, really rough. So let's hit these. Should we hit the slides? Let's hit the slides. Um, and I want to just hit some of these things. I think you'll find it interesting. This is kind of for fun, but I want you to be thinking about, as soon as we're done with the slides, my question is going to be, why do I want to drag you through the history of computing? Why would I want to make you do that? Okay, it's interesting, but give it some thought. Um, so let's take a peek here. Prehistoric. This uh, Ishango bone might date as far back as 18,000 BC, and it and this actually, as you can see, this is kind of like a legend down here. It's like sort of check marks or tick marks. Now, the interesting thing and the difficulty here is, was this counting? You know, was this a counting stick, or was it just art? You know what I mean? Was someone just like, you know what I mean? You grab something and you start just putting grooves in it, right? And, I don't know, right? I mean, then you get deeply into the archaeology and anthropology, and there's some issues there that help guide an understanding you know, of how we look at things and understand things like that from the past. But what is interesting is that it does actually have uh, three prime numbers. Four, I mean, it does actually contain four prime numbers. Yeah, I don't know, right? Consecutive prime numbers. Coincidence? Yeah, maybe. Possible. I mean, I really don't know. I don't know. I certainly lack the expertise to know, in any sort of definitive way. But, I mean, just the notion that there are reasons why archaeologists and anthropologists believe that that was used for counting. I mean, the key is belief. We don't know. You can't know. I don't think with much confidence, given the antiquity of it. But the point just being that humanity back into prehistoric times had a need to count and to calculate and to compute. It really is as old as civilization. And I'm going to be doing this a lot because my back really just hurts like crazy. Here's another one. Now, this one, pretty confident. This is Babylonian clay tablets. This dates from around 2600 BC. Um, and this is counting systems. And like you, I cannot read this, so I don't. Again, this is. I'm taking the word of other experts. In terms of what this is and what's represented there. But interesting, right? It's a long time ago. Uh, and interestingly, around that same time, 2600 BC, just a little more recently than that is when the abacus was invented, created. And that's remarkable because the abacus is still in use, which is really crazy. Um, and this is a more modern one on the left and a more ancient one on the right, a very ancient one on the right. So that's fascinating to me. This one, I believe that's once again Babylonian tablets, but from 1800 BC, and this is actually a trig table, right? Now I don't know, right? I mean, is this like, arctangent? I don't know. Is this sines and cosines? I don't know what trigonometric functions are represented in this table, but it's 4,000 years ago, and you've got that trig table. So fascinating. Then you get to a little bit more modern times, the Renaissance, and this guy William Oughtred, who apparently was one of or the main creator of an inventor, discoverer of logarithms, right, as a mathematical concept. He's the guy who gave us the symbol X for multiplication. Isn't that funny? And apparently was the first slide rule in 1622, the first instance of a slide rule. What's interesting about slide rules, they perpetuated for a very long time. Slide rules were the thing. So if you go, what was the movie? Hidden Figures? I think you see a lot of slide rules going on. I mean, when the moon landing happened in 1969, like, there was a lot of the math that went into that was calculated using slide rules. You realize that, or maybe you don't. But here's some examples of slide rules. Um, Here's something that is a lot more modern. Okay, now somewhere in a box in my house, I have my slide rule that I had in high school and I used in high school for math, for upper level math, physics, that kind of stuff. Okay, you get that? It's crazy. And it wasn't until 1974 that that they weren't even pocket calculators, portable calculators, just calculators, four function calculator. I got one. My parents gave me. I have it somewhere. It still works. I was infatuated with this thing. I was probably, I don't know, 14, 15 at that time. And this thing literally was like a four function calculator with no memory even. And it was like 75 bucks, I remember, in 1975 dollars. And, a decent calculator, the type that is just built into the calculator on your phone. Back then, I remember I had friends that had calculators that they'd spent $200 on in 1975. But understand that I started high school and that was the technology. Isn't that crazy? And I know I'm old as the hills, and I have the white hair, to kind of prove it. But you understand, I'm not that old. And this was high school. One of my colleagues, when I was on faculty at BYU, one of my colleagues had a slide rule, and it was behind like an emergency glass, and it was just on this little thing, and it was just glass in front of it, and then the little label, the sign said, in case of emergency, break glass. Like, you go power outage or something, and you can't, you have no computers. Um, you know, this is you can still do math. Um, but I just find that really fascinating, that was the technology. We all knew how to use them, or at least, not all of them, because some of them relate to higher math functions. Um, I gave you some readings, so you read about Blaise Pascal, the Pascalines, 1644. There was really a thirst. You talk about Cringely talks about, in the Triumph of the Nerds, and interviews a few people who say things like people really, like lusted after computing devices, computers, and the idea, that you could have one that was yours that you could control. It's pretty amazing. Well, just to demonstrate that that yearning went back a long way. This yearning for a computing device, right, goes way back. And I hope that again, I hope most of you have watched Cringely by now. And again, I'll create an accountability mechanism for it. But uh, there's this part where Dan Bricklin is talking about creating VisiCalc and how he would do the spreadsheet and there was no spreadsheet, and that people, professionals would uh, you know, stick their credit card in your face, right? And they would be just like, and they would start shaking and they would be like, this is what I do all week long. You know, the human calculator, again, hidden figures, it really reinforces that idea, right? Right. There was this, if you remember, have you seen the movie? Um, should we do extra credit for Hidden Figures? Not a lot of extra credit, but I mean, I do think it's a movie worth watching. Uh, but these ladies in this one pool, I don't know how it was organized. This was NASA, but there were these ladies, and they were called calculators because their job was to calculate. You know. Um, anyway, then you've got Jacquard with the Jacquard Loom. The critical thing about the Loom is it was not a computing device, but it was programmable. You know, so you didn't have to manually reconfigure the loom, every time or make a new loom, one for each pattern. You could, I think it actually had, if I can see, I'm going to go closer over here. Yeah, right up here. Do you see right here? This, the little stacks of stuff kind of piled up, and then it flips up here. That was basically like, like a paper tape, like a player piano reel. It was more like a player piano. You know how you can do a player piano, right? Where you put this thing on there, and then it comes through and it's clicking, and it's like ba-da 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 ba-da. A good imitation of a player piano, right? That's what I got. What do you want from me? I'm off my game right now. But it was like that. So it would actually feed that through, and on every, some iteration, there was obviously almost like a clock cycle. Like it would move, and somewhere along the line, the program would actually, um, Camille, what was the yes, please? Did I missed the response on that? What that was a response to? Um, but on some kind of a click, the program would actually advance. See what I mean? Oh, extra credit for Hidden Figures. Okay, yeah, okay. Camille and I just decided extra credit for Hidden Figures. Um, but you have to blog about it. Movie inspired posts. Good idea. Yeah, yeah. Movie, movie inspired posts. Um, that was a good movie. It really, really, it was a great movie. Anyway, and germane to the actually, that class is really germane, both from a history of computing perspective and also there's a civil rights element, right? And just that whole. The interesting thing is, okay, quick diversion. I found the movie great, and I don't remember the name of the actor, the main woman who's like the gifted. She's from the calculator pool, right? Um, and she is like really brilliant, like really, really brilliant. I can't remember the name of that actor, but the only struggle I have is that I'm old enough to remember. Not well. I remember the moon launch. I mean, I watched the moon landing on television when I was 9. On a black and white television. But no, those when you go back and you watch those, kind of like the civil rights. What was the other movie recently? The Green Book. You know, I mean, there's a certain maddening helplessness looking back and just kind of going, really, that was the thing? That was the thing? Yeah, and I was there. Yes, it was the thing, which is crazy, right? It feels crazy. But that was the thing. So there is a lot. I think I'm persuading myself of many thumbs up for Hidden Figures, but you got to do a movie inspired post. So we'll just do, Devin, can we do, make a note, Devin? Is Devin still on? Let's do Hidden Figures
Yeah.
as a movie inspired post, and we'll make it extra credit just to, you know,
Okay. Yeah, I'll make a note right now.
spice it up a little bit. But anyway, but just this idea that as this thing is moving, right, every iteration, the thing just goes, okay, click, and then sensing these holes, it would reconfigure like what the new, so you could do patterns in the loom. So now the thread's over here, over there, thread yarn. I don't even know, right? What am I, a loomster? I don't even know. Um, yeah. Then comes Babbage, who really has kind of a legendary place in computing history. And by the way, this book that I told you about earlier, this is the newer cover, Engines of the Mind. If you're interested in that kind of history, this book is really, really tremendous. A great read, an easy read. Joel Shurkin. It's a very easy read and really incredible. So Babbage creates, the difference engine, which he never completed, and then some group in 1991, based on Babbage's drawings, um, they actually built one, and it worked. And Babbage never built it, but they built it and it worked. Isn't that awesome? But again, you understand how hard it is to be, on the forefront of that kind of creativity when it hasn't been done before, you know? In fact, one of the things you may find interesting, I do a lot of work in, expert witness stuff relating to patent litigation, right? Well, one of the interesting things is that literally almost every patent I've ever seen, my first impression upon reading it is that it's invalid as being obvious. You know what I mean? Because you can't patent something that's obvious. And like literally, it's like you read it and you're just like, yeah, 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 blah, blah, blah. There's nothing innovative here. But then you have to go, okay, it's 1989 or it's 1996. You know, the web has been out for like maybe 2 years. Okay, and that's your world, and these are your tools, and this is the environment. Put yourself back in that position, because to invalidate a patent based upon and obviousness or anticipation requires that you have to find what they call prior art from that time that predates it. So if somebody's got a patent that goes back to like 1995, now you got to go find something that somebody published or wrote or, you know, that was a thing that predates that. And then all of a sudden that becomes a harder task. You know what I mean? It's not it's not as obvious a task. It's harder because the hindsight, looking backwards, right? So I'm just trying to say, creating something like a difference engine, it's an amazing engineering feat because you don't have a model really to guide you. You know what I mean? Going in, you're the one trying a new thing, figuring out what works, anchoring upon that. You know what I mean? Um, Hold on, really, really quick. I Okay, alrighty. So then we have the Analytical Engine, also Babbage, and 1837. Again, proposed, not built. This is amazing to me, and I've not made like a personal study of these devices by Babbage, right? So I'm not like a true subject matter expert, but my understanding is that this was intended to be a general purpose mechanical computer. And it actually contained like ALU, like the arithmetic logic unit, could do it, handed a number and what's the operation? Crazy. Conditional branches, loops, memory, insane, you know? And it would take a century um, before the first general purpose digital computer was actually built. 100 more years. That's crazy. That's really, really crazy. And this brings us to Ada Lovelace, who was a friend of Babbage, who was very gifted apparently mathematically. Um, and she published in 1843 the first algorithm intended to be run on a computer. So she published papers. She was also the programmer, for Babbage, exploring and pressing on the programming side, on the actual doing the programming, and Babbage was more about building the machine. So she becomes the first programmer, the first computer programmer, really, in history. There was a language called Ada that was named after her. It was a language. It was an early object-oriented language that was loosely based on, I don't know. It was an Algol 67-ish kind of language, which meant it was sort of Pascalish, but and very and related to modula in some respects. But it was a whole creation, and I think it actually came out of the Department of Defense. So the joke back in the 80s was that World War III would, in fact, in the end, be started by a bug in an Ada compiler. That was the joke. Funny joke. Very, very sort of dark humor joke, right? Anyway, that's Ada. There was that language. Now comes 1884 and we get Hollerith, okay? Herman Hollerith. And this Hollerith punch card, now this is funny because I have had, now we get into the world where Hollerith punch cards persist. When I was a freshman, back in my day, well, actually, when I was a freshman, for my first time as a freshman, when I was 17 and about to flunk out very, very hard, my first programming, not my very first programming, my very first programming was in BASIC in like 1973. But in 77, when I was a freshman in college, my first programs there were in the language PL1, and they were on Hollerith punch cards. That's how long that technology persisted. Okay. And basically, it was just a way of encoding. If you look at this thing, look, I'm gonna squeeze this way so I can read it. But if you look, what you've got is um, what you've got is a pattern. So that the first one, it goes print correlation, comma, ANOVA, comma, step, comma, partial, comma, coef, right? Okay, that P, this right here, this little holes out there, and then another hole. So a hole in this spot and a hole in that spot is a P. We should be able to find, here's a P right here under partial. Notice, see, there's a hole and there's a hole. So, you can see that the P, it's just simply a pattern of punch outs. Oh, the leg is starting to go, man. The leg is starting to go, and when the leg goes, I gotta go. I'll see what my survivability is going to look like here. Anyway, it was literally just a way of representing the data. It wasn't anything particularly magical, you know. And if you look at it, you know, and look for the same letter or the same commas or numbers or whatever, you'll see that you'll just see that they're the same pattern of holes punched, right? And then the whole punchline, as it were, was that having built your program and or data entry with these punch cards, you could feed it to the computer. And this is before, you know, central processing and timeshare systems and, you know, where you jump on and log and save your file. This is before systems like that. But going back to Hollerith, this is before anything. Um, but you could encode, like they did the one of the early censuses, and you could encode the data in a way that it could be tabulated faster, because otherwise it had to be tabulated by hand. You try to do the entire census by hand, and but you know, you'd feed it in the computer and it'd go, little wind would come and it would like, and it would like separate like magic, and then just start going, you know, just start going, or maybe it was off the top. I don't remember. But that's how you submitted your program by submitting punch cards, and then you just come back in an hour, and your program would have run, and then there was a printout of your output. And if your program crashed, it would just dump the entire contents of memory to this screen, to this paper, and that's what was known as a core dump. And then you could sift through memory at the point of, you know, crash to try to figure out what was wrong with your program. I did this. Isn't that crazy? So, true story, in the 60s, my mom worked for McDonnell Douglas, which was an aircraft, aerospace, I don't know what they were, an airplane company in sort of LA, and she was data entry. So her job was to I don't know what other forms it would come in, but she would just do all day long data entry as a typist, where she'd be reading what it was, bada 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 bum, boom boom chin, and it would go clackety 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 clack, and just making punch cards all day long. So she figured out um, what the character pattern was at the top that would make different designs, right? So I remember this. This is actually true. As a kid, we were really really poor, and she would bring home punch cards, like a stack of them. I'm like 5 or 6. It's literally the mid 1960s, and and on the card it was like diamonds. You know what I mean? Like a diamond pattern. This is my impersonation of a diamond pattern. Um, but you know what I mean? So it was like these diamonds. And then she would like take the ends and fold them and staple them, and then go around and staple those together. And she would make Christmas wreath. She would make Christmas wreaths. See, I was doomed to this fate of being a technologist. My mom, when I'm like 5, literally when I'm 5, and then she would do this wreath, and then she would like spray paint it with like gold spray paint or whatever, and then put something in the center, you know, and make a Christmas wreath. You know, we weren't going to be buying one, that was for sure. Isn't that amazing? That was my destiny, man. That was I was destined. Okay, let me keep going here. Yeah, so he made a company in 1911 called Computing Tabulating Recording Company, not a marketing genius. And then in 1924, they changed the name of his company to International Business Machines, aka IBM. So Herman Hollerith of the Hollerith punch cards was the founder of IBM. Isn't that cool? In 1924, and notice 1924. So this was still about data and tabulation. It was about just like a way of just kind of like memory. Yeah, your cards were your memory. So once I had these cards, I could feed them through machines that would like tally it up, or do certain kind of coarse grained calculations based upon what my machine was trying to do. but still not be a general purpose computer. Okay. But it was still very useful because there were still things like the census that needed to be tabulated. Hence, computing tabulating recording company. And then you get to the dawn of modern computers. We get Alan Turing, the father of theoretical computer science. Absolutely. He was, part of, the Bletchley Park group that cracked the Enigma, encoding machine, the encryption machine of the Nazis. That one, what's the movie? The Imitation Game with Benedict Humperdinck as Alan Turing. I liked that movie. I mean, liked it. You know what I mean? Again, Turing's end, and again, the sort of tragic and horrible, intolerance of the era, because Turing was gay, basically, and that wasn't going over really well 100 years ago. Even though he basically, to say he won World War II is a little bit strong, but it's not a statement that isn't somewhat that you couldn't actually debate. That's how important a figure he was. But also, there was also a lot of other folks at Bletchley that were doing this thing. It wasn't the Imitation Game. The Imitation Game is not entirely accurate, and in some respects is fairly inaccurate when it comes to some of the dynamics. It paints it as being much more of a solo effort, and it was in fact much more of a team effort, in practice. That's right, Mr. Mummersnack. Anyway, but Turing was so freaking brilliant, and you got to go back to the time period again in which he's doing this. And of course, Turing machines and general purpose computing. Designed the automatic computing engine, right? One of the very first designs for a stored program, right? Where you could get that fetch, decode, execute that we now refer to as the von Neumann architecture. A little unfair. Von Neumann was also a freakish intellect and a very key figure, but it's maybe a little generous to give that von Neumann architecture, and give him that title. But Turing, man, just amazing man. Just, I don't know, read about Turing. John, and I don't know, honestly, whether you say his name Atanasov or Atanasov. I got to go with Atanasov. The rolls off tongue better. But he was part of he built what is regarded as the first electronic digital computer. Okay. And in fact, is this the one? Yes. This book, Engines of the Mind, it actually goes through that debate of who deserves the credit, and there's debate about whether it's a Atanasov, because also, like, what's the standard for, the first functional, commercially available, digital electronic, what did you have to, what level did you have to get to sort of get credit, So I'm adjusting my freaking girdle, which is not something you normally hear in a computer science lecture. But that was at Iowa State College, in my home state. And really the dawn here, Eckert and Mauchly, and von Neumann was actually part of that group. Who built the Eniac and then the EDVAC, and these guys are, there's an entire chapter in here entitled Eckert and Mauchly. And again, I don't know if it's Mauchly or Mauchly. I apologize to John for not knowing exactly the proper way of pronouncing his name, um, but I'm pretty confident about Eckert. But they built the Eniac, which was the first general purpose digital computer. Now, here, this one was limited. It was the first electronic digital computer. The Eniac took that further. And you notice that's like 7 years later that the Eniac, and there was also overlap between all of these folks. They knew each other. And so in 1949, Eckert Muchley, we can take a vote, hard K sound or a ch sound on that, or maybe somebody can look it up. I might be leaning toward Mockley. I also don't know if it's like Mock or Mouchley. I really truly don't know. Anyway, and then they hired Grace Hopper, who helped design software for the UNIVAC, and then Hopper was an admiral and in what, the Navy, and she invents COBOL, which remains actually weirdly relevant at some level. But Grace Hopper was the inventor of COBOL, and the intent was to have a more human readable, tell the computer in human terms what you'd like to do. Then comes von Neumann, who was a consultant on ENIAC and EDVAC. And then here's the deal: von Neumann writes a paper, a little bit like Ada Lovelace gets credit, appropriately so, but she gets a certain amount of credit because she writes this paper. Well, von Neumann writes a paper about the EDVAC. And then interestingly, because he published a paper on it, and the paper was published before Eckert and Mockley filed their patents, the paper actually nullified their patents because von Neumann had already disclosed it, which the thing about patents is if it's been disclosed within certain windows of time, if it's been disclosed publicly, then it's no longer protected. So, but what he did was, described in this paper, and I have that paper if anybody's, hang on a second, if anybody's interested. I don't know who's interested, but let me just see if I can pull it up because I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure that I actually have, okay, it's not going to come up that easily. Let me see. I thought I could just, oh, there we go. Let me see. Yeah, here we go. And I can also, if anybody's interested, that's the paper. And it's 49 pages long. So, right there. So if anybody's interested, I can drop it in the chat if anybody's interested. There's like no extra brownie points, Okay, thanks, Josh. So yeah, one site said it was a chess sound. Is anybody interested? I'm just going to do it. Ignore it if you don't care. Ignore it if you don't care. But that's von Neumann's paper on the report on the EDVAC. Let me see. Where am I going? My leg and hip are starting to complain badly. We're going to see how this is going to go. I may have to like stand up and walk around while I talk to you. The key is the stored memory computer, the stored program, the fetch, decode, execute idea. You understand how revolutionary that is? You don't have like the program as this one thing and then like memory as another thing. You just have memory and a program counter, and everything goes into that memory, and data, program, everything, and then the control just kind of manages that whole thing, you know. Yeah. So, but von Neumann gets the credit because he wrote the paper, but it wasn't his actual design. So it was a little bit of a, I don't know, a little bit of a not a great move in my opinion, because it was really Eckert and Motley who did it. Okay, that's kind of my quick tour of what am I doing here? Come on, come on. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So, and really, if you get down to it, that takes us into like 1950, and at that point, you get the transistor, you get Bell Labs, you get semiconductors start to show up, right? And then you get, and there's a little bit of a gap in there when companies like Intel, which comes out of Fairchild Semiconductor, um, and folks at Bell Labs that invented the integrated circuit, that invented the transistor. And it's not very long, and then you get big iron, you get larger. IBM begins to make computers. Univac begins to make computers with with vacuum tubes at first, and then with integrated circuits, but it's mainframes. And then and then there's a point where Cringely shows up, and now it's the dawn of the personal computer revolution, which is where I think gets very, very interesting for us, because that kind of defines the world in which we now live. And interestingly, again, I'm old, so I've got this perspective that you don't, just by virtue of being old and having lived through it, which is just some idea of what it was like before that, you know, and then what it became like after then. Uh, it's hard to conceptualize, right? A world in which, you know, you don't have these things. You don't have all the knowledge of the world, right here, literally in the palm of your hand. You know, one of the first handheld computing devices was called the Palm Pilot. I mean, it was all about that idea of just that much power in the palm of your hand. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So what I wanted to do in kind of maybe just remaining time. So first of all, I asked the question at the beginning. This is the class participation phase of the operation, where you have to like pause the office that you're watching concurrently with me muted, um, and chime in. But why am I making why dragging you through that in a class like 305G? Why would I do this? Brick breaker on your dad's Palm Pilot. Nice. Why am I making you? Why am I dragging you through this? Why do we care? You can jump on voice if you want to just chime in on voice. You can drop it in the chat. And I am going to. I tried this in 2810. I'm going to lean back in this chair to take a little pressure off of my spine. We still there? We're good. That's actually better. That straight up vertical is just really brutal on the spine. Now I might as well just like get up in the recliner and, get my pillow. So let me see. Camille said, I think the ethics of social decisions we have to make are all based on choices made in history. I think that's true. I think that they're at least grounded, you know what I mean, at some level, right? They're not like inextricably bound to, these points in history. I really am apologetic for vanishing back here, but the pain is starting to get a little crazy. Let me see.
I guess from reading The Cuckoo's Egg, kind of early cybersecurity, it talks about with more network, we generally give up security, which I thought was very interesting. Kind of understanding that history,
Yeah, interesting.
help us understand the problems that we'll be facing in the future as we become more connected.
Yeah. No, I think it's right. I mean, because before you had that, right, what was your mechanism, right? You had to have, stuff's got to move around. How does it move around? Well, once you have networks, everything is connected. You got like roadways to everything. Well, right, you've got a different kind of thing. Just like crime changed when the interstate highway system was created, right? You could have more cross-state crimes, getaways that quickly get you a couple states away than before that. Let me see. Aaron said the fact that the industry has only been around for a few decades puts an extra emphasis on ethics. Computer ethics isn't a field that's completely figured out yet. Man, amen to that. Totally agree with that. Um, uh, let's see. Matthew, on the timeline, people constantly reinvent a calculating device. Right, true. Driven by the tediousness or limitations of older versions, inventors work. I think that's typo. Work to create newer, simpler, and friendlier tools for humans. Yeah. Um, I'll tell you one of the reasons. You can keep dropping. No, Gabe, Turing did not have a happy end. Oh my freak. No, no, so tragic, so horrible. Um, One of the reasons that I want you to read, think about the history of computing and emphasizing, this was just one class period to kind of rip through the history. And then, there's actually another, 3 hours of cringely, right? Because that's a lot more modern. It's a lot more, that really was a pivot and a shift. Um, and cringely's kind of funny, you know, in a nerdy sort of mid 90s kind of way. But no, what I think we do sometimes is we get trapped in our world and we think that everything that was in the past was inevitable because that's the way it turned out, right? The reality is that that's not true. Before the fact, nothing is inevitable. After the fact, everything is inevitable. But when you're before the fact, you know, the inevitability, um, it's not a given. So then it becomes a question of what are you going to do? Your entire career is right now before the fact, and what are you going to do? What's your what are the ethical decisions? Again, if for those of you, the majority of you that have watched The Social Dilemma already, right? They're talking to even who's the guy? Jack Dorsey. Is it Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter? Who's like, I think it was him. There was maybe some others that were just like, yeah, we didn't realize, kind of like what we were building, and then what's the moral obligation, and that they really explored. I love that we talked a little bit about some of the a little bit depressing, some of the messaging, but I love the fact that awareness to say, like the one guy, I can't remember his name, talking about being at Google and the relative ethical morality of creating this incredibly addictive thing for engagement, right? It's eyeballs, it's screen time, and then he does his paper, and then everyone's like, oh, and then nothing happened. What is the moral obligation? And I think that true of any of these kinds of ethical conversations, I don't know that it's obvious or clear that anybody really has a lock on the right answer. You know, I mean, I would certainly maybe have my own opinion about certain things. There's some other things I'm quite confident I don't know, you know, that I would just really have to noodle a whole lot more. And then maybe I don't noodle all the way until I'm faced with a decision, you know. Um, yeah, anyway, but that's why. And the other thing I want you to just understand is that to look at the industry not as a bunch of forces that are outside of your control, but as you get to be part of things that are changing the industry. You know, this kind of hit home to me when I was in Cupertino, California. There's a history of computing museum. I don't remember what it's called exactly. Computer. Can somebody look it up? It's like Computer History Museum or Museum of Computer History. I don't know, but it is sort of like the definitive computing history place. It's got, replicas of Babbage and, difference engine and crap like that. So just a lot of, early, you can kind of like walk it through, and read all the stuff, which I did. I was there one time. But what was really interesting is that as I went through that computing museum, and there's all this stuff about it's all the legendary everybody's, right? And this was probably about 10 years ago. Yeah, it was probably around 10 years ago that I did this. But in that museum were two products that I had worked on, you know? Isn't that crazy? It's not like you plan that, but one of them was the infrared, literally the infrared beaming in the Palm Pilot, which my team built that software for Palm to go into the Pilot, which was it, Pilot 2, the Palm 2, the first one that had infrared beaming. There was literally an ad playing of that featured the infrared beaming in the Palm Pilot. So literally a video going that was showing technology that my team had built for Palm, and another one was just a NetWare box, NetWare 3, but it was some box that had there was software in the box that I had written, you know, because I just happened to go to Novell when they were hot, and then 3 years later they lose all of their vision and become a weird hellscape, you know what I mean? And go from the coolest company in the industry for a couple of years to a company that somehow, you know, didn't see the internet coming. You're the number one networking company in the world, and you just got sideswiped by that. I don't know how you do that, you know. Anyway, just saying. I'm just saying that you don't realize that you're going to, find yourself in situations on the forefront of things. Maybe you have an idea. Maybe there's a company you want to start. Maybe you'll do a thing. Maybe that thing will change in industry. Maybe not. Maybe that's okay and you don't want to worry about that, but maybe you do. Just to understand that you can kind of do in this industry, you can do anything the fetch you want. You can go try anything, and it's still the case that a few people with a great idea can still upend the industry, you know? And this is why in technology, in high tech, it's a little dicey. Now, I'll qualify this, but it's honestly a little dicey to talk about monopolies. I posted a link about monopolies in the readings, so check that out on the class schedule, where somebody kind of makes an argument, of why these tech companies are monopolies. Because the classic definition of a monopoly is that you have this sort of like a steel grip on something. The classic one was I control the steel mills, I control the coal mines, I control the railroads, and in that environment, you then now you're who was that? Who was that? Carnegie, Rockefeller. Now in that environment, I can now essentially extort money because you have no option, and now I can gouge you. And in high tech, it's really a funny thing because you look at Amazon, which I do think is in a monopoly position. the byproduct of which is that I get goods cheaper than anywhere else, and I get them 2 days later, at my door. Now, the reason that I think that Amazon is more particularly in that domain of being a monopoly is it's an entrenched position with the warehouse and the technology that almost nobody can truly go compete with straight up. You know what I mean? You cannot price compete. So what's you know what I mean? What's left to differentiate on? But I think you just have to admit, I hope that it's a little different because, the weird thing with, say, Walmart or an Amazon, both very driven by technology, is that the ultimate effect, and The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman talks quite a bit about Walmart. Friedman talks about the value of Walmart if it were a government program to provide, food and things cheaply to, the poorest Americans. And it would be like this $1 trillion a year government program. And then, but it's not like, oh, and everything's just, double rainbows, and sunshine. So, whereas, other companies, is Twitter a monopoly? I don't know, ish. AWS, ish, but not really, All I'm trying to get at is that it is still possible for somebody to create a thing that comes out of nowhere and blindsides the powers that be. That's the bottom line. Bill Gates once said in an interview that, and this was when Microsoft was kind of at their peak, when they were kind of the Google of the day. Well, who's the hottest? What's the hottest tech company today that you could like? It's got to still be Google, right? Like, you know what I mean? The most prestigious hire. What's the most prestigious place you could go get hired today? What do you think? Curious what you think. But basically, at a time when Microsoft was that company in the industry, yeah, I'm gonna probably go Google. At that point, Microsoft, Bill Gates, maybe it was in Crinsley, where he basically says that they just wake up every day just terrified that somebody can just show up and eat their lunch, and they know it. And that's why, even though they have a monopolistic position, that's why they, continue to innovate and press and press and press, because they know that in tech, your lunch can get eaten a lot quicker than in other things. Again, companies like Amazon, I think, are a little different. Hardware companies and tangible goods, Amazon shipping product, the warehouse infrastructure, those are unspeakable strategic advantages and barriers to entry for competition. Twitter, no, not so much. Twitter could just become MySpace, really quickly. Vine goes away. TikTok could go away, right? I mean, anything that's currently an entrenched leader, Instagram, Facebook, they can go away really, really quickly. So are they monopolies? Yeah, at some level. So those are interesting questions. But I just want to say, in your careers, you have an opportunity to be disruptive and to still go and, get after it and do cool stuff. Whatever the crap you feel like doing, there's still an opportunity. In this field, there's never been a lower barrier to entry to get in and compete with somebody. Anyway, I got 508 and my back and my leg, the bad ones, are creaming me. So I'm just, any last comments? Because I gotta cut loose. Seriously, I am dying here. I'm dying. Plus the girdle is like cutting off my circulation, which is just back support, you know, but yeah, I'm going to go rest. Anyway, I hope this has been good, been interesting for you. Go blog, finish the cuckoo's egg, finish the cuckoo's egg. And I'm really looking forward to talking about that. I'm going to get my buddy Seth Nielsen to come speak one of these times, but I got to just check his schedule. So, all right, my friends, I'm going to cut. I'm just going to cut before I pass out from pain or something. Later.